The Saga of Ragnar Loðrok, Chapter 12. And then it had happened that men escaped and found King Einstein and told him that to his kingdom had come an army which was powerful and thus difficult to deal with, and which would not leave anything unharmed. They had pillaged all they had come across so that no house was still standing. When King Einstein heard these tidings, he thought he knew who these Vikings might be. And then he had a summons sent by arrow throughout his entire kingdom. And he summoned all those who were his men and who wished to give him troops and might bear shields. We shall have with us our cow Sibilja, who is a god, and let her leap before the troops. It seems to me that it will go as before, that they will not be able to stand before her bellowing. I will encourage all my troops to do their best, and thus drive off the large and evil force. And then it was thus done, that Sibilja was let loose. And then Ivar saw her charge and heard the hideous bellowing which was coming out of her. He thought that all the troops should make a great noise, both with weapons and war cry, so that they would barely hear the voice of that evil creature when she charged towards them. Ivar spoke with his carriers, telling him that they should bear him forward so they might be closer to the front. And when you see the cow come at us, cast me at her, and it shall go one way or the other, that I shall lose my life, or she shall have her bane. Now you must take one mighty elm tree and carve it into the shape of a bow, along with arrows. And when the strongbow was brought to him, along with the great arrows they had made, they did not seem to them unsuitable for weapons to anyone. Then Ivar encouraged his men to do their best. Then the troops went with great impetuousness and noise, and Ivar was borne before their battle array. Such a great din arose when Sibilja bellowed that they heard it just as well as if they had been silent and standing still. Then that caused it to happen that the troops fought among themselves, all save the brothers. And when this wonder took place, those who bore Ivar saw that he drew his bow as if he had a weak elm branch, and it seemed as if he drew the arrow point back past his bow. Then they heard a louder twang from his bow than they'd ever heard before, and then they saw that his arrows flew as swift as if he had shot a crossbow, and they saw it happen that the arrows came to sit in each of Sibilja's eyes. And then she fell, but after that she went on head first, and her bellowings were much worse than before. And when she came at them, he commanded them to cast him at her, and he became to them as light as if they were casting a child, because they were not very near the cow when they cast him. And then he came down heavily upon the cow Sibilja, and he became then as heavy as a boulder as he fell on her, and every bone in her was broken, and she received her death. Then he commanded his men to take him up quickly. And then he was taken up, and his voice was ringing so that all heard when he spoke, and it seemed to all the army as if he was standing near each man, though he was far off. It became perfectly silent as he gave his orders, and he spoke to this end, that the warring which they had come for was soon to be all finished, and no harm was done to the troops who skirmished briefly amongst them. Then Ivar encouraged them to wreak great harm upon those they had fought. And now it seems to me that the most violent of them is gone, since the cow is slain. And then both armies had their troops drawn up, and together they clashed in battle. And the battle was so difficult that all the Swedes said they'd never had such a trial of their manhood. And then both brothers, Svitserk and Bjorn, went at them so hard that no battle array could stand against them. And then so many of King Einstein's troops fell that a scant few remained standing, and some decided to flee. And the battle concluded thus, that King Einstein fell, and the brothers had the victory. And then they gave quarter to those that lived after the battle. And then Ivar said he did not wish to harry in the land, because that land was now lacking a leader. And I would that we could hold course until a greater opposition is before us. But Randalin journeyed home with some troops. And thus ends chapter 12.